Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. Most Americans worry about having enough to fund their retirement, and a recent report from Vanguard grabbed headlines by saying 58% of Americans are unlikely to maintain their current standard of living once they stop working. That's a shocking number, and I'll be honest, whenever I see a stat like that, I get a little bit excited because that generally means there's a report that I can dig into about recent retirees. But once I dug in, this story ended up being way more complicated than I ever imagined, and honestly, more discouraging than it ever needed to be. So let's walk through what this report actually says and why I think it leaves out some very real retirement resources. Vanguard divided households into 4 income groups: the 25th, the 50th, the 70th, and the 95th percentiles, and asked a simple question: how much of your pre-retirement income can you actually sustain in retirement? Let's start with the median household. Vanguard assumes a worker earning about $42,000 a year before retirement is a median worker. They estimate that to maintain this lifestyle, that they would need to make $35,000 a year in retirement. But when they ran the numbers, Vanguard found that this individual would only safely be able to count on about $21,000. Now, where would this $21,000 be coming from? Well, it's assumed that the vast majority of it, about $19,000 of it, would be coming from Social Security benefits. The remainder, about $2,000 on an annual basis, would be coming from investments, which means that our median individual is essentially 100% dependent on Social Security and still facing a roughly $14,000 shortfall in spending to maintain their current lifestyle. Now, just to be clear, Vanguard is not saying that you have to 100% replace your pre-retirement spending dollar for dollar. Instead, they have a target spending range of 60 to 80% as a replacement. But still, these gaps are pretty glaring. At higher incomes, the story does shift. An individual earning $61,000 before retirement would need about $41,000 as a replacement. But Vanguard projects that they'd only have about $31,000, so still facing a $10,000 shortfall. At the top end, earning around $173,000 a year, Vanguard actually shows a surplus thanks to stronger savings and investments. It also might be worth noting that the presumed investment levels at each of these income levels are as follows. For those in the 25th percentile, as defined by Vanguard, it's about $11,000, assuming a 4% withdrawal. At the 50th percentile, about $42,000 invested. At the 70th percentile, around $167,000 invested. And around the 95th percentile, closer to $2 million. Here's where I think this report went a little bit off the rails. If you've heard that the median household income in America is about $84,000 a year, and that the median household net worth is around $162,000 a year, why is Vanguard calling the median $42,000 and presuming almost no savings? To put it into perspective, the Census Bureau shows that the median individual worker's income is closer to $62,000 as of 2023. So when Vanguard frames the median worker's individual income as $42,000, it feels a bit arbitrary. So how did they get here? Well, they took household data from the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances and cut it in half. The median couple earning about $84,000 a year got cut in half to an individual worker as the median, making $42,000 a year. But here's the thing. The couple in this household wouldn't individually be living on $42,000 a year each. They would be living as a couple on $84,000 a year. And they're not saving or retiring separately as 2 individuals. Instead, they're saving together. They would have shared Social Security benefits, and importantly, they're sharing expenses. Splitting a household like this ignores the cost efficiencies of living together, like shared household expenses and shared utilities, but it also ignores the fact that it becomes easier to save when you're part of a joint household. You can't just slice a household in half and assume both sides now face the exact same expenses and the exact same retirement outlook, which is why this model makes the middle class look so much worse off than they actually are. They paint the median family as having almost no retirement savings, when in reality, they often have assets and they often have multiple Social Security checks. And that combination makes a very big difference. And if we look look at the same survey of consumer finances from the Federal Reserve that Vanguard references, the savings picture looks far stronger than Vanguard implies. A household at the 25th percentile might only have about $11,000 invested near retirement, but once we get to the 50th percentile, that number is closer to $150,000. At the 70th percentile, it's around $600,000 in investable assets, excluding home equity. And at the 95th percentile, households often have $2.5 million or more. And when we compare those figures to Vanguard's figures, we see the savings for the 50th and the 70th percentile took quite a hit when the households were split. So when Vanguard shrinks our households to individuals, the implied balances don't line up with the reality we see. Based on a simple 4% draw, the sustainable income from those portfolios would look very different from what Vanguard modeled. So what do we do with all of this? First of all, I don't think Vanguard's report is entirely useless. I do think it highlights a very real problem that often individuals do not have enough saved up, and often far too many people are far too reliant on Social Security as a sole income source in retirement. So yes, this very well could serve as a wake-up call that yes, you may need to save more in order to have a comfortable retirement. But second, we need to put these numbers back into context. If you have modest savings and you're part of a dual income earning household and both you and your spouse are eligible for Social Security benefits, your outlook on retirement is probably not as grim as Vanguard suggests. Let's rerun the numbers using more realistic assumptions. For someone aged 60 to 65 who's still working full-time, the median income is just over $60,000 according to the U.S. Census Bureau. At age 65, the median investable assets are about $100,000. With Social Security, that individual worker's benefits at full retirement age would be about $2,300 per month, or about $27,400 for the year. Once you add in a conservative 5% draw from their $100,000 portfolio, that's only going to give them an additional $5,000 per year. Now we're looking at a total income of about $32,400 annually. That's definitely still a gap if you're targeting maintaining a consistent $60,000 a year lifestyle as you transition into retirement, but this picture changes drastically if you're not living alone. If you're married or partnered, your household may have 2 Social Security checks, 2 sets of savings, or spousal benefits to rely on. If we took our last example and doubled the Social Security benefits, all of a sudden, even with the same level investments, we have an income of nearly $60,000 a year. And that could be quite doable depending on your retirement circumstances. Perhaps you retire with a fully paid off home or fully paid off cars. What if you're willing to delay claiming Social Security all the way to 70? This would increase your benefit further. Making these changes and depending on the circumstances you retire in drastically change what this picture looks like. The point is there are multiple levers to pull in this situation to change the situation. And I do think it's very important to present data as accurately as possible, not in a way that makes the problem seem bigger than it actually is. Because here's the reality. Yes, many Americans should be saving more than they actually are. It is far better to arrive at retirement with a little bit extra saved than a little bit too little saved. But the way this report frames this data makes it feel engineered, like they almost tweaked things to make it feel scarier. And of course, if you're Vanguard, that message serves you because Vanguard wins when you save more. And I say this with genuine respect because I truly love Vanguard. It's the brokerage house that I use. I think they're a wonderful company, but I also think it's important that we tell the narrative in an honest way. And when you look at surveys from retirees themselves, from Transamerica, Gallup, and the National Council on Aging, you see that about 80% of retirees say they feel financially comfortable and can confidently meet their expenses. That side of the story matters too. We shouldn't just be pushing a fearful narrative. Yes, many people could benefit by increasing their savings rate, but there are also many people who are doing well and will retire very comfortably. And the true retirement picture of many retirees is likely not as bleak as this report makes it seem. Truly, we need to take all reports with a grain of salt. Yes, it's true that many Americans are saving too little and they certainly could benefit by saving a little bit more. But when we take household data, split it in half, and skew savings downward, we give a distorted picture. The truth is, retirement isn't just one number or an average. It's personal. And it depends on your savings and your expenses and your health and whether or not you're living alone or with someone. My key takeaway is to use reports like Vanguard's as a wake-up call, but don't let them be the final word. Run your own numbers, figure out your own guaranteed income streams, figure out what your gap is, and then figure out how you're going to fill that gap from your investments. Because while studies tend to push a fearful narrative, the truth is that millions of retirees are doing just fine, and you can too, so long as you have a plan for your situation. So don't walk away discouraged. Walk away motivated, because saving and planning for your future can give you something no report can, which is options, flexibility, and peace of mind. What are your thoughts on this report? I'm very curious. Put them down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye. My battery went down to 1%, and if I let my battery die, some reason my camera breaks. So usually I would just film until it went off. I don't think that's good for the camera. If you work with cameras and you can tell me why that was destroying my camera, I'd love to hear it. That's gonna show up on camera, isn't it? I'm sorry. Saving can be easier to save. Saving can be easier to save. That's not how we deal with data, people. That is not how it's done.